I'm going to just disclose that at some point I may call the film Operation Rainfall. I'm fully aware it's called Occupation Rainfall, but for some reason, my toddler-addled mind keeps calling it Operation Rainfall.
I'll tell you something. I saw it written as Operation Rainfall on a few little articles, and my brain didn't register. Like it didn't pose a problem to my mind, and I thought, and then I got scared when I saw it as Operation Rainfall. I thought, shit, have I written it as Operation Rainfall? If I was okay with it, you know, and I started going back through tweets and everything and thinking, anyway.
So yeah, I was like, I'll get that out of the way. But you know, we're here to talk about Occupation Rainfall. Can you tell us a little bit about your character of Hayes?
Yeah, he's a guy who's Wing Commander Hayes is this guy who's fought in the war against these creatures. He was held captive. He was brutally tortured and by them, and lost his well, you know, am I spoiling the movie by saying this? He's lost members of his family to these creatures. So there's something of a vendetta in him. He certainly is not seeking peace like some of the other protagonists in the piece. And I dare say I don't really disagree with the thing he was doing in the piece, which I think is a tribute to Luke's writing, and that he kind of made this incredibly sort of complex man who ostensibly some might say is the antagonist, but really he's fighting the fight that one would want him to fight if you were on Earth at that time, you know, given what they were besieged with, right?
Yeah. So is it that duality of his character that sort of appealed to you and wanted to bring him to life? Yeah,
and also just the opportunity to work with Luke, because Luke to me seems like a Roland Emmerich. He's somebody who can take, you know, he's part of a new generation of stop it. Now what about my dog? I got a 10-week-old puppy. He's crying to get in. You know, it was the opportunity to work with Luke, you know, and the role, you know. Yeah, it was the complexity of the character. Are you gonna be good? You're a complex character. So adorable, but you eat cat poop. So, but yeah, it was that complexity and Luke's ability to navigate something of that scale. Back it up. Hey, get out of there. God damn it. It's Luke's ability to navigate, like, you know, an idea of this kind of scale, even though there are some fairly obvious limitations. I mean, he probably was operating with like a 10th, a 20th of the budget that some movies in Hollywood get, but he was just so determined to make it the way he wanted to see it. And when I finally saw it, I was like thoroughly impressed. I think he's an amazing visionary, and he's the most stubborn human being I've ever met in my life. I think he's gonna do incredible things. I can't wait to work with him again.
Yeah. I mean, am I right in saying that this is like your first venture into sci-fi?
Oh no.
No?
I've done other things. Well, you know, I mean, it's not fair. I've done fantasy stuff. So maybe that's not. I guess fantasy sci-fi all get locked up into the same thing. I'm sure I've done. I don't know. Now I'm getting older and I'm starting to think about what I've done. Which is I used to watch actors doing this, and now I'm like, oh yeah, well, it's 25 years now. I'm sure I've done shows and things which had a sci-fi element to them. I must have. We'll leave that to enthusiasts to determine.
Yeah, I mean, it must be strange, because obviously, in this one, there are aliens. There's essentially sort of like people in suits. That must be a different challenge as an actor, because you've got to sort of ignore everything that's going on around you.
Yeah, well, but I've been doing that for 10 years on the original. So there's often either a person in crazy makeup, or doing something disturbing, or I'm chopping somebody's head off with my hand, or pulling a stake out. I've been doing that stuff for a long time. The surreal stuff, acting to a tennis ball on the end of a C-stand, so to me, I'm very, very accustomed to that stuff. But I wasn't but this movie had a certain grit to it, too, and it needed to have a kind of naturalism, even though it was a very heightened piece. So it was an interesting kind of chord to strike. We had to almost act to the size of what Luke was going to create, and luckily he'd already made a film before, so he was tried and true. So I could see what he was doing, and then and act to that, rather than, because there's a temptation when you're in a room just with actors and that he hasn't CG'd in the aliens yet or whatever, to act at a certain size, and the world doesn't really feel like it's ending, and you're just trying to make it kind of real. There's a danger in real acting, because any two actors can kind of do a scene, but if it doesn't have the stakes in it, that he's going to create with music and sound and kind of the all of the majesty that Luke Sparke brings.
Yeah, and I mean, you were born in Canada, you grew up in New Zealand. You're most famous for playing an Englishman. Here, you're playing a gruff Australian. How on earth do you keep track of all the accents?
Well, I'm mostly Americans, and so it was weird. Like, I must say that going, I don't have difficulty because I just get it ready. It's like a muscle, right? But when I went back to New Zealand to go do Coming Home in the Dark, which is the movie that just premiered at Sundance, I had to play a New Zealander, and I really struggled getting a sound back that sounded like a New Zealander, because I'd been living here for so long, and the problem is it's not your timbre, it's your cadence. Your cadence my cadence had become quite American. It's not, when people say, "Oh, you sound like an American," you say, what really mean is, it's not so much the words you're saying, or sometimes it is, but or the words you're selecting. It's your phrasing. It's the way. It's the music that you're making with your sound, and that music changes when you're in a new environment in order to be understood. It's why some people go to London and spend like a year and a half there and come back and they sort of sound like a Brit. It's entirely possible to sort of, in order to be understood. I think people often see that as a something demonstrative or pretentious kind of demonstration, right? It's actually, if somebody's listening well, we have this natural inclination to sort of mimic. So for me, actually, the hardest thing was playing my native accent, playing a New Zealander, and I picked a really rural sound for this guy, and that made it even harder. And I was terrified the whole time it was going to sound.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. In this film, having seen you in in the originals and the Vampire Diaries, I did spend a good 5 or 20 minutes, first 5-10 minutes of you on screen going, no, I could, like, my brain couldn't connect your voice in this film with what I'm used to. So it's
it's true. Or and have you seen Coming Home in the Dark?
Not yet. I missed out on Sundance.
Yeah, I mean that damn well needs subtitles. Like, I can't. There's a cool, because he slurs too, and he's got a lisp. And I had these teeth built for him. I had these fucked up teeth, like, and so he's talking like this, and when he's talking, he's saying, "Hey mate, you got to," like, it's what the guys I was hanging out with for research and stuff like sounded like, and there was just a sort of a lisp and a slur and a rural kind of music to their sound, and it was it's not easy, like.
I mean, I can only just about speak English, so I don't know how you guys do it.
I've quit.
I mean, going back to this film being a sci-fi, I mean, all films have the ability to, but I think sci-fi, more than some others, it really lends itself to being able to express commentary on our society and our climate that other films don't really. I mean, here, you've got Aliens, especially. You can really explore things that are happening in our own world. What do you feel like that Luke's sort of potential commentary, hidden or not so hidden, is with this film about?
I liked your phrasing there of the not so hidden, and I mean, to me, it was about globalization, and the fact that we're at an exponential speed, perhaps a speed humans aren't even ready for, where we're integrating, and we're feeling the growing pains of those, whether it's the knee on the back of George Floyd, or whether it's the tensions we're seeing between Palestine and Israel. What we're seeing is a world that's becoming aware of itself through technologies that are making it aware. There are enormous factions growing in the Middle East of women who are like, hey, well, what rights do I have? There's enormous. We're seeing governments being overthrown in the case of somewhere like Egypt. Where it's I think there's been this monstrous collision that we didn't sort of feel or we're in the process of experiencing, right, between technology and people, and this globalization is incredibly turbulent right now, and it's creating perhaps unnecessarily like kind of factions and tribal ideologies, and I think that's what Luke was talking about.
Definitely. I mean, you've played good guys, bad good guys, good bad guys. Which one's the most fun to play?
I never ever think of a guy I'm playing as a bad guy. I mean, for all intents and purposes, you could say that in Coming Home in the Dark, I play Lucifer himself. Like if you were just watching that movie, you'd be like, that's the most sinister character I'd ever read in a script, and because it was kind of real, right? It wasn't like The Hills Have Eyes. It wasn't silly, It wasn't a cartoon. He kind of felt real, and so in a way, but I still always find a way to love them, like genuinely like love them and forgive them and kind of understand that they're born into a certain socioeconomic circle, and they have certain influences in their life and certain abuses and emotional pressures. And these guys, I never regard anybody as a bad guy or a good guy. I just regard them as a person. I know that sounds like a convenient and cliche political thing to say, but it's genuinely true. I never, of course, I can see from the bird's eye view, oh, this guy is perceived as the bad guy, and of course I can see that. And it's a very interesting time for me. Like that seems to be a lot of what I'm receiving now, and I think I'm kind of a nice person, which is interesting that seems to be what is coming down the pipeline for me. And I say, bring it. I want more.
Definitely. I mean, I guess, my sort of, final question is, we sort of, we have, discussed it previously, but, Coming Home in the Dark, it did just sort of premiere at Sundance. I'm very, very hopeful that it's going to come over to these shores pretty soon. I missed out on Sundance. I missed out on Sundance accreditation by like a day, and was very upset when everybody got to see all the films I wanted to see. But are you, what can you tell us about the film? Obviously, you've already mentioned that you play a New Zealander, but what else is the film
about? So it's basically about these couple of drifters who have just committed a terrible crime, who are sort of on the run, and although it doesn't necessarily feel like they are when we meet them, but they happen upon this family replete with its own tensions and kind of family dynamic, and it's about this family's how essentially they're captives to these men, and what's revealed throughout the course of the movie, and the relationship between this family and these men.
Well, I say, I'm fingers crossed that it's going to come over here on the UK festival circuit.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. I mean, I'm prouder of that than I am of anything in my career, for sure. Like, I mean, it's the most beautiful thing that I've been a part of, and I'm so grateful to my writer-director, James Ashcroft, because that was something I felt I had to do. And, not an easy film to make, definitely not easy to prepare for. I spent like 3 months in New Zealand, locked away, and trying to get, and not so locked away, in order to get ready for this. And I'm very, very proud of it. And I think people, look, it's not a date movie. It's not an easy film, but it's riveting, I think it is, and it's one of the few that most I don't watch most of my work. I think I've watched the originals up until about season 3, and I just don't watch. I'm not very interested in what I was doing. I might look at it down the road a little bit. I watched episodes I directed, but I'm not very I'm not very interested in my work once it's done. But this was one I really wanted to see, and I actually watched it and was kind of having an experience, I think, which is probably not too dissimilar from what anybody might have watching it, which I found to be remarkable. And that's just a tribute to how incredible James is.
I mean, you're just making my FOMO even worse now. So
it's coming, doing that. It's coming. Look, if it premiered at Sundance and it's getting the reviews it's getting, it's going to go. It'll be everywhere. It's just that it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. It's not. It's not a safe movie. Like, you're not safe. You're in danger from the moment that movie begins. It's just an incredible piece of work, and cinematically, I'm just so excited to see what James does.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I will wish you best of luck with Occupation Rainfall, and with Coming Home in the Dark when I eventually get to see it. And I'm going to let you go back and play with your puppy. And
Thank you so much.